Welcome to the Growth Fire Podcast, where we engage with top business leaders who share their experiences and provide real insights that help them attract customers, retain staff, and grow their bottom line. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi there, my name is Kevin Horrigan. I'm the host of the show where I featured inspired business leaders from various backgrounds and industries who are willing to share their stories and insights. This episode is brought to you today by Spinutech. Spinutech is a digital advertising agency with 165 team members across the United States, helping their clients attract new business, retain existing, and ultimately grow in their revenue and client satisfaction. Spinutech, we thank you for your partnership today. Our guest today is Bridgette Bello. Bridgette is the CEO and publisher of the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine. Prior to managing the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine, Bridgette spent 11 years as the president and publisher of the Tampa Bay Business Journal. Bridgette was the first woman ever to be a publisher of the newspaper's 40-year history, which is quite remarkable. She's also the winner of the St. Petersburg Chamber Business of the Woman Year, Best Moms of Tampa Bay. She's the proud mom to 3 beautiful children, all graduates from Florida schools, and a proud Florida Gator herself. That is going to stir some controversy. But at any rate, in addition to publishing the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine, she also serves as the governor-appointed trustee for St. Pete College. She's a member of the Jameis Winston Foundation for CEOs Against Cancer. Bridgette, your accomplishments are very impressive. Welcome to the Growth Fire Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely. So we know we got some Gators and some other Florida school grads and stuff like this, but Bridgette, before you had this amazing career that you've had and you went to school here in Florida, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, maybe when you were a youngster, what you thought you might want to do for a living? Maybe just help us get a little background about, how you grew up.
Sure, absolutely. I was born in Lubbock, Texas, and oftentimes get the, of course, you're from Texas comment. Grew up in Austin and lived there until my parents divorced when I was 12 years old. My mom moved me to what I refer to as Melbourne, Florida in 1983. And so I'm almost a Floridian at this point. I've been here a whole lot longer than I ever was in Texas. Graduated from high school there, moved to Gainesville to go to the University of Florida, go Gators, and to Jacksonville from there for 13 years. And I've been in Tampa for the last 16 years, actually. So I've lived here longer than I've ever lived anywhere, and I absolutely love it here.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've known you for all of that time. And it's funny,
Yep.
You lived here longer than anywhere else. That's interesting. I didn't think that about you, but that's interesting. Bridgette, growing up, started in Texas, went to Melbourne, Florida, which is Melbourne, Florida, for those of you who don't know what Melbourne is. But as a young girl, leaving Texas and going into Melbourne, Florida, and then into University of Florida, what were your thoughts about what you're going to do for a career?
So this is one of my favorite stories to tell. It used to be my mom's favorite story, but it's now mine. I've stolen it. When I was in elementary school, actually, I had my first piece of writing published. It was something that I did for a creative writing class. I was supposed to be a raindrop and write from the perspective of being a raindrop. My parents owned a small business, and one of their clients actually used what I wrote for their commercial. And so my very first being published was a TV commercial in Austin, Texas, when I was in elementary school. I kind of always knew from there that that's what I wanted to do. And believe it or not, went to school for journalism. I was editor of my college newspaper when I was in junior college. And when I moved to the University of Florida, I worked on the Alligator staff. It was very unfortunate timing. I was there the year of the student copycat murders. Mm-hmm. And my first assignment was to talk to the parents of the girls who were murdered in that. And that was when I really gave pause and said, I'm not really sure that this is what I want to do with my life. Yeah. I had envisioned being a truth seeker, and that's what I had done in my previous roles, where I was actually a journalist, and writing about, dead kids and their parents was just not something that I was excited about. So from there, I went into radio for the first 10 years of my actual career. And then into the Business Journal's organization for 20 years of my career. So I always laugh that I've literally had like 5 jobs in my entire life. That's not the way of the world anymore. Obviously, there's
No.
very few people who can say they worked for an organization for 18 years, but I did, and have been on my own for the last 5 and have not looked back.
That's an amazing story. Quite an amazing story. You talked about, when your first assignment was writing about those tragedies here in Florida at the time. Have you ever hypothetically thought what your career trajectory would have been if maybe the assignment was something more fun?
I'm one of those people who, like, when people have said, like, what is your regret? What would you tell your younger self? I really don't have regrets. I really feel like every step that happened to me or that I took got me to where I am. And I'm really, really, really pleased with where I am. And so, no, I haven't really sat and thought, what if? It's funny that you asked that, because I heard somebody the other day ask the governor if he had been good enough to play Major League Baseball, would he be in politics? And he was like, absolutely not. He said, I would be playing Major League Baseball until the day they threw me off the field, right?
Yeah.
I've really never had that moment. I loved being in radio. It was something that I thought I would do until I died. When I got out of that and moved on to the Business Journal organization, it was something that I thought I would do until the day that I died. And where I am now, I kind of feel the same way about. So no, I've never really spent time thinking about what if.
No, I think some do, some don't. I don't think there's anything, healthy or unhealthy about it. It just, my childhood dream was to be a dentist. I started to go to school to be a dentist, and I had to take a career change based on guidance counselors advising as a bad career. I reflected on it numerous times before that, the guidance counselors thought that modern dentistry medicine was advancing so quickly, the need for a dentist wouldn't really exist. And I haven't found that to be true yet. As a matter of fact, I have a dentist appointment this upcoming Monday morning. So I think
let me know when that is true.
Yeah, I think it would have been a good
Nobody
dentist.
likes a dentist.
No, but I think I would have enjoyed it. But for whatever reason, someone decided to change that career trajectory.
Well, I will interrupt you on that and tell you that there was a moment where I had an interruption in my career trajectory. And that was, I always thought I wanted to be on the news side of it and the reporting side of it. And so when I left the Alligator, I went to a radio station in Gainesville, and I was doing the morning news. So I was in broadcast news at that point, which was never a part of my plans, right?
Right.
I liked it. I didn't love it. I had to be there at 4:30 in the morning, and and most people in Tampa Bay know that if I'm up at 4:30, it's because I'm still up, and not because I actually got up.
Right.
And the station manager came in to me one day at the end of my shift, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you, and kind of pulled me out of the broadcast booth and was walking me towards the door. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting fired, right? Like, I'm sorry, I'll do better. I'll be here at 4:30. I won't be late anymore, whatever. And he walked me out to the parking lot at the radio station, and he pointed at a car, and it was a Ford Pinto, which hopefully your audience is old enough to remember what that means, right? They exploded on impact.
Yep.
And he said, that's the car that my highest paid on-air personality drives. And then he pointed at the other end of the parking lot at a BMW. And he said, that's the car that my highest paid salesperson drives. Which car do you want to drive? And he really genuinely saw something in me from the business perspective that I never had any intentions of, right? And I ended up spending, to this day, honestly, my career on the business side of things. I certainly now still have my hand in content and in the reporting and the direction of what we do. But, I never woke up one day and said, I want to be a radio salesperson or I want to be a media salesperson. And so I do think that is a trajectory change in my career that turned out to be really wonderful. And I'm still friends with him. He still owns the same station. And I have gone back and said, thank you over and over and over again. So
I'm glad you shared that, because as you know, the podcast is called Growth Fire. And, to me, when I listened to you tell that story, that individual saw something in you and gave you an opportunity. He could have taken advantage of them and just let you be in the booth all the time and do all of that stuff, but he saw something in you. And he gave you an opportunity to see things that you didn't necessarily have the visibility to see yourself. And we'll talk later in this discussion today about mentors and things like that. But so many times there's, that wasn't your trajectory, but someone had a conversation with you and it gave you fire for growth in another area. And I know you and I've talked about, I had a story I was a hotel manager, and I was having dinner on a Tuesday night, and I was having some conch fritters and a Bud Light, and one of my buddies' dads, who was a lawyer, came and sat next to me, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Having a Bud Light and some confiters." It's like, "Where are you going? Like, how many days a week you work?" I'm like, 6 to 7. He's like, "Why wouldn't you do that for yourself?" He's like, I think you really need to think, Kevin. What are you going to, what do you do? What are you trying to accomplish? I remember I was the most depressed but most excited like at evening of my life, and it changed absolutely my direction. That day changed my direction. And without that conversation, I don't know when or what it might have. But you look at those types of moments that those people don't know necessarily what that conversation meant, but it was definitely the fire that ignited some growth.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about more fire that ignited growth. You were the first female publisher of the Business Journal in over 40 years. So not only did this radio station owner see something in you, but obviously the Business Journal did. Can you talk a little bit about, any adversity or challenges or maybe glass ceiling or something that you felt being a female executive growing in an organization that never had a market president be the leader that was a female?
Yeah. So to be clear, I was the first female in Tampa Bay. I was not the first female in the organization.
All right.
Yeah. I wish, that would be a great story.
Yes.
But it's still a great story that, Tampa Bay is a very influential market, obviously, and a growing market. And they did see something in me. But I think the important part of that story is that I also saw something in myself.
Yes.
And when I joined the organization, and this is always a fun story to tell, I'll skip the middle part, but I joined because I had a 6-month non-compete in radio, and I had left radio for what was going to be the sexiest, highest paying job ever in the history of ever when I was 29 years old, and had just put my husband at the time into business and had a 3-year-old little girl. And long story short, I got a phone call that said basically, we fired the person that wrote that contract with you, and we won't be honoring it.
Wow.
And I was jobless. And like I said, all the other circumstances at the time. And I got a phone call from the publisher of the Business Journal in Jacksonville. And he said, I keep asking for referrals and your name keeps coming up. Will you come in and have a conversation? And I was like, of course I'll come have a conversation. Right. And so I did. And when I accepted the job, the thought process and the conversation at home was, well, this is a good place to sit out my non-compete. I've got 6 months. Radio is what I love. It's what I've always done. And it's the only thing I know how to do. And this was leading the sales organization, not the reporting organization. And, that turned into an 18-year career. So I never went back to radio. The 6-month non-compete came and went, and I never even thought about it. But while I was working at the Business Journal in Jacksonville and watching the organization and the kind of the growth pattern that they were on, I said, I want to be a publisher. I want to run the show. I loved my publisher. I still love him. We're still friends. He taught me everything once he realized that he thought I could do it. He took me in under his wing and let me kind of learn how things operated and worked. And so I just kind of put my foot down and said, this is my line in the sand. Like my next move is I'm going to run a market or I'm going to leave. And so, the rest is history. And it was a wonderful career with a wonderful company. I mean, I literally was there from the time I was 29 years old until I was 40, almost 8 years old.
Yeah.
And learned a lot and wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question. We talk about growth fire and stuff like this, and talk about what in your journey helped fuel some of your growth fire and stuff like this. And it sounds as if you were enjoying the experience, but you saw something bigger than the role that you were brought in for, and you found a leader in there that wasn't intimidated to allow you to learn a lot of what they knew, to allow you to pursue your growth, which sounds like maybe even surpassed a market that was bigger. Can you talk about that journey and some of the decisions you made or had to have commitments of others around you that helped you be able to do that?
Yeah, I owe a lot of it to him. I mean, it's funny that you say he wasn't intimidated. He certainly wasn't. But I also think that he thought it was going to take me a lot longer than it did. He knew that I wasn't willing to go anywhere but Florida, and that, we were in Jacksonville, and I didn't want to live in what I lovingly refer to as the armpit of the state of Orlando. I don't get people who want to live in Florida and not on the water.
Right.
and that I don't speak Spanish. And so I was pretty specific about where I wanted to go. And that's just not the way the company operated at the time.
Yeah.
They would send you to Dayton, Ohio, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, some of these little teeny tiny markets where you would learn. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And so I think he had a longer on ramp than he did. And when it actually came to fruition, he was like, wait. Yeah, all those things we talked about that you could be doing. Let's talk about those. And I was like, no, it's too late. It's time. I'm going. But he was super supportive, right? It was like once he realized she's going, and that's what I love about her is like once she decides she's going to do something, she's going to do it.
Right.
And again, I've been gone from the organization for 5 years. He's been gone longer than that. We're still friends.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change the relationship that we had, but he had to trust me enough to bring me under his wing and to share some of the stuff that maybe wasn't so pretty, or that was, that peek under the covers that not everybody gets to see until somebody believes in you and says, I'm going to teach you these things. And so I really owe a lot of kind of what happened next to him trusting me enough to share that stuff with me.
And I think part of, growth too is finding that relationship with leaders that you can have a little bit more transparency. And I think sometimes, have you experienced in your career where, people ask for that transparency, but when they saw what it was, that kind of intimidated or scared them?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, right?
Right. And it sounds like you were willing to take it on. He was willing to share, and you weren't too adverse to what you saw. You were able to manage it and understand it and just get more tenacious and say, I'm ready to take it on.
Well, what he didn't tell me was that they were going to kind of, I joke, drop me off in the market and like, okay, go be a publisher, like go, with zero. I'm like, there's no book, there's no train, there's no, like, there's nothing. Right.
Yes.
But I figured it out. And I think that's what we do as leaders. We figure it out. And so he didn't give me a complete transparent picture of what I was signing up for, but I think he gave me the best one he could.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So Bridgette, you said the last 5 years have been Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine. I read it every month. I'm going to take it on an airplane with me this Friday to learn this month's issue. But tell us a little bit about the magazine and who you serve.
Sure. Well, you're a previous cover, so I hope everyone took your issue with them too and read it. I know you got some great feedback when you were on the cover, and that was actually when you were transitioning too, and was a lot of fun to be able to share your story.
Yes.
As you said earlier, we've been friends for a long time, and so we've seen each other go through a couple of transitions together, and that's always special and meaningful in a friendship. We saw a void in the market. We saw an opportunity where really there was business news and there was information that was need to know, and things that businesses going out of business and laying people off and leaving the market, and those kinds of things that like people getting indicted or being under federal investigation. Those are all things that people need to know, right?
Right.
But there was nobody that was really focused on how do we make a positive impact on the Tampa Bay region by highlighting the CEOs and the people running companies that are a part of this region. And how do we be a part of economic development and do something that is going to be meaningful and that is going to matter. And so we were very intentional with who the audience was. We're what is referred to as controlled circulation.
Yes.
So we bought a list from Dun & Bradstreet where we asked very specifically for titles of business owners, partners, founders, presidents, and CEOs. And that list is comprised of 15,000 people. Their companies are anywhere from 3 million all the way up to hundreds of millions. And they're in the 6-county area. So they're, north to Pasco, south to Sarasota, Manatee, east to Polk, and west to Pinellas. Growing up on the east coast of Florida still throws me off. I used to think, where's the beach? And that's how I knew where east was. And now it's the opposite of that. So I have to actually think about it. But, every piece of content, every event, everything that we do is very targeted into somebody who is running a company, growing their own career, and how do we help them do that? And being very intentional about that has served us very well over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and it's great. It's a great magazine, and obviously you have advertisers. Can you talk a little bit about what your advertisers are expecting out of you in the magazine that makes them, desire to have a relationship with you, spend money in your magazine? What is it that they're seeking in return?
It's funny. It's a lot less than you would think and a lot more than you would think at the same time. We kind of tore apart the different models that we saw and said, what's working with this one and what's not working with this one, and where do we think we can excel? And so really with a lot of print publications, what you get is an ad in a print publication, right? What you get with TBBW is an experience. It's connections. It's very meaningful connections. We're very intentional also about who's in the room at our events. So even the events that we sell tickets to, we still have an invite-only list that we allow to purchase those tickets. And so by keeping those rooms exclusive and making sure that it's literally peer-to-peer networking for those CEOs, we keep those CEOs coming back. Yes. And no one else has been able to do that. Yeah. And it's become the hottest ticket in town. It's become the number one question I get asked is, how do I get on that list? And we're very specific about how you get on that list, and we're going to keep it that way.
Yeah, no, I saw you a week ago at your event and had to ask you if you had one extra ticket left because I registered too late. So they all seem to be sold out, but I love the opportunity that you're keeping like-minded peers together. And the temptation would probably be to expand this and increase quality, but perhaps increase quantity, but perhaps to some, the quality would be changing. And so, I think many businesses, struggle with growth, but is it strategically going in the right direction, or is it diluting some of the value that others perceive? And it sounds like you're holding true to your principles and maintaining the quality standards that you have and finding a great model inside of all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, we could make money selling tickets to all the events and putting on social media. And, people say to me all the time, well, I can't find the event on your website. And I'm like, you're right, you can't, and you're not going to. Right. You're either on the invite list or you're not. And like I said, that's not going to change. So,
and it's just so respectable that, obviously trying to grow a business and all that stuff, to be able to stick to that discipline is very respectful, because it's just not easy to do. I think as leaders who are trying to grow, distractions can often prevent growth. We can chase after a bunch of distractions, and it's hard for many leaders to be able to stick true to the principle. And it's just admirable that you've been able to do so. And there's lots of temptations, I'm sure, but you're sticking true to your principle. It's respectable.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the favorite one is, my husband always says, is there really not a price for the cover? And I'm like, no, there's really not a price for the cover. You really can't buy that. And he's like, come on, B, and he'll throw numbers out. And I'm like, honey, no, there's not a price for the cover. But the number of times that gets played back to us, and sometimes played when we're not even in the room, right? And you hear all the time, like, what people say about you when you're not there is what really matters.
Right.
And I, the fact that people respect that, and that you pick up that magazine because that person didn't pay to be on the cover, that there's a reason you should know them and that you should want to do business with them. And that's another thing that's just never going to change, that we're not going to waver on.
And again, that is so admirable. And it just, again, on the quality side of things, it's just holding true to that principle. And I think we see many organizations, eventually maybe lose sight of that for growth, but lose something in that vision for growth too. And so it's a great nugget to be able to share. Bridgette, I know, part of leading the Business Journal and what you do today, you've led many sales organizations. How do you see selling differently now that we're in 2023?
Oh, that's a deep question. It's different in the way it's delivered, right? So we have Zoom calls like we're doing right now. We have Teams calls like we're doing right now. But at the end of the day, I genuinely believe that people still do business with people they like, and that they feel a connection to, and that they trust, more importantly than anything else. And that's really difficult to build over a video call. I think that that in-person, eyeball to eyeball, breaking bread together, sitting across the desk from each other, I don't know that that'll ever change. I mean, the whole AI thing and who it's replacing and what's going to happen is, it's one of those things that I think maybe is a forever career. Right. Because I don't think it can be replaced by that, right? I don't think anything can replace that human connection.
Right.
And so we do some very entry-level calls on Zooms or Teams or whatever, but there's almost zero presenting or actually needs analysis or learning about our clients that takes place anyway, other than to be face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball.
That's great. So you're still seeing very high touch the way you're leading it, and so that's still working for you. I attended a webinar today by one of the sales training organizations. It was how to use artificial intelligence to write outbound emails, and it was interesting all the scenarios they described. But I don't know if I walked away with in knowingly actively how to do it. And you know, I heard him say it can write the email, but it lacks the personalization. And so, you know, I think they were saying, you know, you could help this maybe help you cure, you know, AI can cure writer's block if you're stumbling on how to maybe craft an email.
Sure.
You can lean on AI for writer's block. But writer's block isn't going to create that personalization. And, you know, I think, like you said, people like to buy from people that they like and trust. And, you know, another old saying is people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to. Well, people like to buy from people they like and trust. AI might sell, but AI isn't building that relationship of like and trust. And so for someone who's, you know, I think the point of the training that I attended today was let AI help you with the areas that if you're a good relationship builder, but maybe you're not, the presenter today said, I'm a terrible speller, right? And so AI is not only helping me create what I'm not good at writing, but it's also helping with spelling. But they're great at relationship building, and they're leveraging their emails to try to get a discussion to leverage what their inherent skill is, which is getting a face-to-face conversation, but leveraging AI to help them better craft a more grammatically correct email with probably better grammar, better wording. But still they're trying to get a face-to-face meeting. And so, you know, as you hear about is, you know, AI to replace these jobs and things of this nature. As a digital advertising agency with a large team of copywriters, we don't think they're replacing copywriters. We're helping them be more effective and more efficient. We're seeing, you know,
Absolutely.
AI, we're seeing AI, you know, our software developers, they're not writing code with AI, which can be done. But we're seeing as an opportunity to be able to quality assure code and be able to test code a little bit more efficiently than having to write scripts of itself to go out there and do the same thing. So, you know, I think, you know, as we just look back at growth and some of these things that we hear out there and stuff like that, they're not taking away the human element of some of these things. They're just complementing it, making it maybe more effective and more efficient, and letting us do what humans more need to do and stuff that we've maybe been able to push along to a piece of technology, let it go in that direction.
Yeah. So my running joke is, if you've seen any of the movies, when the robots are coming, it never ends well for the humans, right? So there's got to be that human aspect to it. Do I think it can make us more efficient and can help us with certain things that we're maybe not so good at, right? Like, I don't need help with my grammar and my spelling, but I might need help with something else that it can help me with. So yeah, it's
absolutely.
The humans are coming. We're coming back.
Right. Exactly. Yes. You know, Bridgette, you know, obviously work hard, you know, with your own business today and Tampa Bay Business Wealth, but you also give back a lot to the community. You're on many boards, involved in many organizations and stuff like that. What fuels you to be so active? And then maybe how have you grown in being active in these organizations?
Yeah, so I kind of say this a lot. I don't think we can have a good community if we don't have a good community, right? And so if those of us who are in leadership positions are not stepping up and seeing what we can do for our communities, how we can get back, whether that's, you know, the old adage, time, talent, or treasure. I mean, I'd certainly get back through all of those.
Yes.
But I probably give more time and talent than I do treasure. Yep. And that's irreplaceable in a lot of those cases, right? The organizations that I'm involved in, some of them are mission-based. I'm a breast cancer survivor and a skin cancer survivor, so I'm super involved in ACS and also in CEOs Against Cancer.
Yes.
Leukemia Lymphoma Society is the board I sit on. I don't have a tie to that cause, right? But something that's happened to me twice now, which is really interesting, is I was super involved in the American Cancer Society before I was a breast cancer survivor.
Wow.
And so it was like this moment of, oh my gosh, like, okay, I was where I was supposed to be. Well, the second time it happened to me was I agreed to chair the Alzheimer's Association Gala. It was only the second year. They needed somebody that was strong and that could help them raise money and help them get more people in the room. And a friend gave me way too many martinis one night, and I said yes. And it happened to be that I said yes for the 2020 chair. we all know how that story ended. There was no gala.
Right.
So I ended up chairing for 2020 and for 21. And in that time period, even though I had zero tie to the cause, my aunt not only got Alzheimer's, but died from Alzheimer's in 9 months in the middle of the pandemic. And so again, I was giving to I know it's like, maybe I shouldn't join any more organizations because I'm going to end up tied to the cause somehow, right?
Yes.
But the fact that I had given to them and that they were able to give back to me in such a meaningful way and help me get through some of the most difficult times in my life, and that they knew I was there for the right reasons until I was there for myself, really, really came back to me, right? And so I hope I answered all three of the questions that were embedded in that one question. But
yes, I think you did. I mean, first of all, you said, what motivates you, and that is to have a great community. You have to have a great community, and a great community is the leaders in the leaders in the community who are helping the community, be successful with, great jobs, a great reputation. They have to give back. They're looking for that leadership to be able to, and many of those leaders were fostered by prior leaders, right? And so I think, as you're saying, what fuels you to do so, to have a great business in this community, we have to have a great community. And to have a great community, we have to be involved and not wait for others to do it, is kind of what I walked away, is kind of what your message was. And then, ironically, as you've been generous with your time in some of these organizations, ironically, they've been ones that have end up becoming near and dear to your heart. So, as you know, I serve very active in the American Heart Association. We just celebrated 2023. We had the largest live auction fundraising in the country. I think last year we were number 2, the year before we were number 3. And so I'm not one whose family is really prone to heart disease, but I'm affected by many peers who are. And my former business partner had a stroke 3 days after he decided to take an exit from the business. He had a stroke 3 days later, and he was 40 years old. And so you just never know, how people can be affected by these things. And, heart disease is it's a big issue but in doing that, like you said, I'm around other leaders who want to get back to the community and help make our community amazing and healthy too. And so it just does feel good. And I learn a lot. I get a lot of fuel from it. I get a lot of fuel from in serving on those boards. We not be watching those leaders in their companies, but we're watching those leaders in board meetings and the questions they ask, the expectations that they set, the assumptive closes that they make, the clear commitment to involvement, are educational to me. And they only help me understand different styles or different approaches from people who are far more successful than me. And I don't get to see that in their own boardroom, but I get to see that in the boardroom of the not-for-profits. And it definitely gives me an opportunity to learn in an environment they're comfortable sharing their approach, which I doubt I'd ever get to be a witness in their actual boardroom, so to speak. And so
that's a great point. I never thought about that before, but I bet they're tougher in the nonprofit meetings than they are in their own boardrooms. But I could be wrong about that.
I think there's some have different styles and different approaches, but again, you get to see it in action. And sometimes they're making uncomfortable asks, and uncomfortable asks. I think many people aren't comfortable making uncomfortable asks. It's just an expectation sometimes of how things have to propel going forward. And different people have different styles of how to make those uncomfortable asks, and it's interesting to me to watch those take place and try to find your own way of trying to make asks that aren't easy. As you said, you were asked to chair for this one, and it's because they expected you to be able to raise money, and you didn't have any passion or cause for it, but you felt there was a way that you could step up and help the community grow and help this organization grow. But it involved making asks for an organization that you didn't have anything personally to gain from, other than you're trying to help the community. But that's what growth is all about. It's not about just your own growth. It's about helping others grow, helping the community grow. And I think, long answer to your question, I think you answered it really well. I think it's a way to help people grow. And it's not just within your organization, but how can you grow outside your organization? How can you help your community grow? How can your industry grow? How can you support some things that maybe you do have a passion or cause that maybe is purposeful? And finding out there's more growth opportunity in your professional career outside of what your day job is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bridgette, 2 more questions. You've mentioned You've mentioned a radio station owner. You've mentioned a former boss at the Business Journal. I view these as mentors or people who help influence you. Can you mention any names of any mentors you have and how they've helped you through your career?
Yeah. Well, the radio station owner's name is Doug Gillen. My former boss at the Jacksonville Business Journal's name is David Sillick, both ironically men. And I think there's a lot to be said for that when we talk about women in business and where we get our motivation and our support from. I never, you asked me if there, and I don't think I answered you, so I'll go back to that a little bit. If there were any trials and tribulations being a woman leading what was a, man-led periodical for many years and what, quite frankly, is a man-led industry. And I spent a lot of time saying, stop being a woman in business and just be a business person and be the best business person you can be, right? And then I read, like probably most women in business, the Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And as I was reading through that, I did have these moments of, well, that happened to me and that happened to me. And, where I think really what that book did for me was make me realize that it's our reaction and it's the way that we choose to perceive things.
Yes.
That really gets us to where we are. And so, there's a woman here who I'm proud to be able to say has served as a mentor for me almost since the day I got here, and that's Rhea Law.
Yes.
And she had made an introduction for me to somebody who is a very, very, very important person in the region who will remain unnamed, who I was trying desperately to get his attention and for business purposes. And I sent him an email that was a cutesy kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, like girly kind of email, right? And she picked up the phone and she called me and she said, "Don't you ever do that again." And I was like, what is it that I did? And she was like, "You just belittled yourself. Like you just made him be up here and yourself be down here." And that was such a moment for me of like realizing that I was acting like a girl, for lack of a better way to put it, right? And that I was trying to use being a girl to get me what I needed or wanted instead of using being an amazing business person. And so Rhea's been there literally since day one of moving here. And to this day, she's by my side. She was by my side yesterday in trying to help another woman find a job. And she's just one of those ladies that, if she can help somebody, she does. And I think there's so much to be said for that. And I've really learned a lot from her.
No, and I wrote down, she's absolutely, I'm going to ask her to be a future guest. She's a great example of someone in our community who absolutely is, just very impressive. And, that's the kind of mentor and stuff like that. And I love she called you and said, "Don't ever do it again."
Yeah.
like that is just, tough love isn't always easy to take, but sometimes it's necessary to get us out of old habits. That's a great story. Bridgette, last question I have. Where do you get inspiration today to continue to find the drive for your continued fuel for growth?
So I posted something the other day that is becoming my new mantra, and it is basically, here, I'll read it to you because it'll only take me 2 seconds because I pulled it up at lunch today when I was talking to somebody about exactly this. And it is, "May your success offend the shit out of anyone who didn't want to see you win." And yeah, the people who don't want to see me win. And there are some of those people out there. And I think that's true for everybody. Right. And so my post was, let's go offend some people today. Like that's what keeps me going, is the people who didn't think I could do it, who told me I was crazy, who said, it literally said to me in 2018, "Bridgette, like print's dead. Like nobody reads print anymore. Have you lost your mind? Are you really launching a print publication?"
Yeah.
And you didn't tell the story, but you were one of the people that said, "I don't know where you're going and I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going with you."
Yep.
Right. And I will never forget that.
Yeah.
And there were enough of those people who said, "I don't know where you're going or what you're doing, but I'm going with you." Yep. That it's been a hell of a ride and a lot of success and a lot of love and support and caring. And, I said earlier, I haven't looked back once. I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, there's certainly been painful moments. There's certainly been things where I said, I could have done that better, or I could have handled that better, or, things like that. But we've won a gazillion awards, and people are still reading print, as evidenced by you're taking the magazine on the plane with you.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I love the community that we live in, and I'm never going anywhere else. And I love the story that I get to tell and the opportunities like you've given me to tell that story and to share that with other people, because there's a lot of naysayers out there. There's a lot of people who will tell you can't, or you're crazy, or you shouldn't. And I disagree. And so thank you again for giving me the chance to tell my story and to be a part of your show.
Well, as you're closing on that, Bridgette, I just got to double click on a couple of the nuggets that you just left out there, because I don't think they should be overshadowed with the close. One of the things is just, part of your new quote here is part of your fuel is to prove those who doubted you wrong. That builds something I've seen common in all of the guests on the Growth Fire is just tenacity. I read a quote, and I don't like this quote. I like a lot of quotes, but I like the meaning of this quote. I don't necessarily like all the words, but I read a quote about a half year ago, and it says, "Do you know what separates successful people from those who are less successful?" I don't love the words of all of that, but I do like the answer. The successful people choose to do what the others didn't, even though they didn't want to, didn't feel like doing it. They still did it, and it separated them. Their tenacity, their conviction to get it done was the difference between those who did it and those who wanted to do it. And then I had a podcast guest a few months back who we were joking. I was joking. He sends all kinds of inspirational social media posts out there. And I was, poking at him a little bit. And he said, "What happened to the ones you used to do of every Monday morning doing a Monday morning sunrise run?" I said, "Man, I just kind of felt dorky, doing that." I said, "But really, I had a couple of people reaching out, said, keep it up because it's motivating me to do it every Monday morning."
Yeah.
So I just felt too dorky doing it. I said, do you know who's calling you dorky? I said, "A lot of people." He said, "No, the people who wish they were doing it themselves." He said, "Start doing it again." He said, "Wouldn't you rather support the people who are getting something from it than to continue to have fuel for those who are envious?" And it made me really reflect. Like, I had a lot of people say some things about that was their inspiration, and I'm stopping doing it because I know there's some people out there stirring some stuff up, but they're still in bed every morning when I'm doing that. It made me reflect on exactly what you're saying that you repeated at lunch was today. And so I think part of growth is you have to make an added commitment over and above what others do. If you want to step out, and above, you do the things that are unpopular. You do the things that not everybody's going to do. But the reward is getting those done. You're not living with regret. You're living with accomplishment. And I think that's what part of growth is all about.
Yeah, there's another way for you to say what you were trying to say, since you don't like part of it, that I'll give you, and we can close with this. But it's always been one of my favorites. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way. And if you don't, you'll find an excuse.
That's great. I like that one way better.
Yeah.
We've been talking with Bridgette Bello, publisher of the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine. Bridgette, I'm sure people are going to want to connect with you after they listen or watch this podcast. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way to reach me is email. I live by it. Unfortunately, I guess I should say, which is bbello, just like my name, at TBBW magazine, mag.com.
Great. Bridgette, thank you so much for being a guest on our Growth Fire podcast. We really appreciate your time, the insights, and wish you continued success on your journey.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being my friend all these years.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Fire podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.